In this video, I'm going to talk about birthing alone. It could be called a free birth or an unattended birth or just alone. When Birthing Better Families began to develop these skills in the early 1970s in the US, as I repeatedly say, we lacked choices, or we lacked formal choices as we do now. Most of us, I gave birth in 1970, most of us went into the hospital to give birth, but that was a unique period in American history and in some ways around the world in modern countries. It was the second childbirth concept, and it was skills-based. It was based on Lamaze, Bradley, and Grantley Dick Reed. The first childbirth concept, which will always exist, is you never know what your birth is going to be like. And that's often followed by, therefore, there's nothing you can really do to prepare for it. So Lamaze, Bradley, and Grantley Dick Reed, all three male obstetricians, were basically saying, no, wait a minute, there is something that low-risk women can do. They can learn our breathing and relaxation skills and not be afraid of birth, and then they can achieve a natural birth, pain-free labor without medical care. What was exciting about that period of time was that we, as women, wanted our husbands to be in the birth with us and to actually actively coach and know how. So hundreds of millions of American families from the late 1950s to the middle of the 1970s attended childbirth preparation classes that were entirely based on skills because we lacked choices. By the 1980s, when I gave birth last, the skills were totally gone because the natural birth movement knew that not enough women had achieved those goals, and they felt that what hampered those goals was a lack of choice. So by 1980, the childbirth classes became information-based, pros and cons of what were called medical interventions, and that you write a birth plan, because as women, we know what kind of birth we want, and we should tell our care providers and then say no to medical care, or what type of medical care we'd be comfortable with and what type of care we wouldn't be comfortable with. But when we talk about home alone births, since the 70s, I have traveled extensively and lived in many, many, many countries. And I've talked to thousands and thousands of women about their birth experience. And I can tell you that birthing outside of a hospital or birthing where there is no care provider is actually more common than you probably think it is. We tend to think of a choice, home birth. I'm choosing to birth at home. We ignore when we talk about alone births, and I'm not certain that's the best phrase, that women, they give birth as they enter the hospital or in the parking lot of the hospital or on the way to the hospital or at home accidentally just because birth was really quick and they weren't planning to birth at home, or their care provider in a home birth didn't show up due to the weather or the fact they were sick. Any number of variables. It's like what we began to hear in the 1980s. Women used to birth by the rice paddy and then get back up and work. Well, most women don't birth alone, although there are some cultures in which women do go off by themselves alone. Most cultures, traditional cultures around the world, a woman either births where she lives, or in many other cultures, she and other women in her family go off, often for many months, when she has a baby. So birthing on your own or birthing alone is actually quite common. I would say, of talking to thousands of people, it's probably about 15% of all births. They just happen, and women end up giving birth wherever. So how does this fit into Birthing Better Families? As I've said in other videos, when Birthing Better skills were developing in the early 70s, it was because mothers and fathers wanted a wider range, a broader range, a more adaptable, adjustable, and sustainable range of skills. And why? Because we were asking questions. Well, what if this happens? Or what could we have done? Or what about this? Or this happened, and could I have? So we were asking a lot of questions because the skills that were available back then, it was the beginning of a new childbirth concept to have skills. And the beginning skills-based methods, like many beginning methods, are not very sophisticated. However, the evolution of skills got stopped because the natural birth movement said cows and cats aren't taught to birth, women don't need to, and famous people like Michel Audin were saying women just need to discover birth by themselves. Well, that's what we were doing before we demanded that our husbands come into the birth with us and help us. We didn't want to go back to that. But the natural birth movement by the 1980s was a loud global voice, and it also was part of the stimulation of the mummy wars, hospital birth versus home birth, breastfeeding versus bottle feeding, natural birth versus medical birth, and those mummy wars have been incredibly destructive to us. There's a reality, and we have to follow the realities. One of them is that 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth one way or another. That's just the reality. It's not 57% or 99.9%. 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth one way or another. The other reality is that every woman is doing the activity of birthing her baby, whether she's alone or in a room with hundreds of people. There's no one else doing that activity, whether it is with or without medical assessments, monitoring procedures, whether it is a labor and a vaginal birth or labor and an unplanned cesarean or planned cesarean. We are doing the birth by ourselves, 100% of us. So another truth or another reality is that every activity is best done with a level of competency or with skills. For a period of time, hundreds and millions of expectant mothers and fathers in the United States became skilled to these beginning skills-based methods. What are other realities? Women don't have to like birth. What's another reality? The birth of every baby is important to each family. There isn't anyone who says, my baby's birth, really that's not important to me. What's another reality? We remember the birth of our baby throughout our life. So let's talk about what birthing alone means. Let's first talk about if you're the only one there, meaning the birthing woman. Well, you have to do it. You may or may not have chosen to birth where there is no one with you. You just have to do it. That falls under 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth one way or another. So birthing with no one else present is one way or another. You have to do it. What Birthing Better Families discovered was we felt better doing it when we had skills. Once the body skills were developed and we were using them significantly, a greater percent of Birthing Better families ended up surprisingly being births that were unattended, often by women being on their own, because the labor progressed so much more rapidly. And often women didn't think their labor was progressing because they were coping really well, and then unexpectedly they pushed the baby out. Or it happened at night when births often happen, and the couple was there by themselves. Sometimes women were going, I should go to the hospital now, and the guy was going, don't think you're going to make it. But some got in the car and gave birth in the car on the way to the hospital or in the parking lot or as they were being brought into the hospital. So when you're alone, by yourself as a woman, it is better to be skilled. It's as simple as that. There's no other word to describe it. It's an unknown experience. We do not know. That is the first childbirth concept. There is no way to know what your birth is going to be like. When we are skilled, we work more on a moment-to-moment basis with intention. If we've learned the body skills in birthing better and we've prepared our birth canal, then we also know how to check ourselves, which means that as birth is progressing or changing, we can check and feel for change inside. We don't have to lose that brain to asshole connection that women often lose, which is expressed in, I don't know what's happening. I don't know where I am. But when you can check yourself, you feel change. And when you feel change, it correlates to the changes you feel as you have contractions. So doing the internal work and learning to check yourself comfortably is one of the great skills if you end up birthing by yourself. When women birth by themselves, it's rare that they gather things to them. They don't set up the environment. Because if they have time to set up the environment and they were planning to either go to the birth center, go to the hospital, or have someone come, like have a midwife come, that's what they were paying attention to. to. They're focused on getting those things into play. Birthing alone is usually that the birth is moving along so rapidly that unexpectedly you find yourself giving birth. So what did birthing better families learn from that experience? The biggest thing is just do it. And the second thing is after the birth, don't do anything. Don't try to cut the cord. Don't try to stand up. Don't try to put the baby to the breast. Don't do anything. Just turn the baby over on its stomach. If there's a cloth, just cover the baby a little bit or put a cloth underneath it if there's a puddle, or move it out of the puddle. Don't pick it up. Don't do anything, because your life is most at risk once your baby is out and prior to your placenta coming out. And that short period, or that period after the birth and after the placenta comes out, when you could get up, stand up perfectly straight, walk to the toilet, come back perfectly straight. That is a physiological indication by women the birth is over with. However, what we learned about accidentally having babies at home by ourselves is that we needed to take care of that period after the baby was born. Most babies are fine. Of course, if there's a problem with the baby, then you're going to have to figure out how to attend to that, to call 911 or 111, depending on what country you're in. But most babies are fine. And you don't want to put yourself at risk. So just calm down. Just allow your body to make this change from having a very large uterus to having a smaller uterus, to letting that uterus rest, to feeling the contractions, the expulsion of the placenta, to looking down and making certain that your life's blood is not pouring out of you. And if it's not pouring out of you, then just wait until you actually feel that you could get up, stand up straight, go to the toilet, and come back. You do not have to cut the cord of the baby. And if you cut the cord of the baby, it's better to leave a long cord on the baby's side than a long cord on the placenta side. If you've walked to the toilet and you're upright and you feel fine, then pick up your baby and explore it. If you don't feel fine, then it's important, if possible, for you to hydrate, to get some fluids into your body, preferably warm ones, but that might be difficult unless you have warm water on tap. And if you have a little salt or a little sugar, put that into your drinks as well. And if you feel really poorly and you have communication, then call someone and explain what's happening. So if you accidentally birth on your own or plan to birth on your own, become skilled. People who plan to birth on their own tend to get things together. And the thing that we'd like you to get together is 4 liters of room temperature fluids with a little salt and sugar, so that if you are bleeding or if you don't feel well, you can hydrate yourself. Because hydrating means that you keep your cardiovascular fluids up to a good level, even though you might be anemic. It is when your cardiovascular fluid, when you lose blood and don't replace it. What do doctors do? They put an IV in you. They're replacing your blood volume, even if you're anemic. So what happens if you birth alone by choice with others with you? And this is what Birthing Better families discovered. If we're on our own, if there's nobody else with us, that's the only person we have to rely on is ourselves. So when we're skilled, we are more likely to have a very, very skilled birth that we remember for our life. As soon as you put another person in the room with a birthing woman, if that other person shares the skills with that woman, then they will work together in that birth, because they recognize that birth is a vulnerable period of time, and they will take that experience very, very seriously. It's not offhanded. Oh, women just birthed at home. Yeah, they did. And the words normal, natural, and physiological mean in those situations in traditional communities that anything that could happen might happen. So people were very observant and very protective of birth, not because it was a sacred space, but because they didn't want anything unfortunate to happen. But those 3 words, normal, natural, and physiological, have come to mean that it's safe and it's easy and it's a good outcome and don't worry about it. But Birthing Better families took the cautionary approach. Normal, natural, and physiological means that anything that might happen could happen. So therefore, Birthing Better families who birthed together at home with their families and friends. They all had skills, and they all were observant and paid attention until, how did we know it was over? Until the woman could get up, walk upright, not bent over, walk upright to the toilet, go to the toilet, maybe clean herself up a little bit, walk back, and then you could start to celebrate the baby. Baby's patient, don't worry about it. Being skilled makes a huge difference. We can't make everybody become skilled. We just want you to spread the word that we need to grow a self-learning, skilled birthing population. Birthing without care providers is not uncommon, and we want those births to be safe. We want families to be skilled. We'd like families to be skilled by knowing CPR as well, wouldn't we? Or the Heimlich maneuver. We don't think that choking is going to happen, but it's good to have a skill to deal with it. We don't think somebody's going to have a cardiac arrest or stop breathing, but it's good to have skills if it does happen. We can't practice birth beforehand. We can't plan birth. There's no way to know what your birth's going to be like. We can try to plan it. We can hope our plans unfold the way we like. But in the reality, as I've talked to thousands of women in many, many countries around the world, I can tell you that about 95% or more will say birth was nothing like I thought it was going to be. So we have to have a new way of dealing with it. And the new way of dealing with it is to grow a self-learning, skilled birthing population. And where choices are available to women, have skills and choices go together. Because when you look at that 95% that birth is nothing like I thought it was going to be like, about that percent say, my birth plan didn't unfold the way that I thought it was going to be. Because women may know what kind of birth they want, but that doesn't mean they can plan the birth they have. So birthing better families were infinitely pragmatic and practical. We wanted skills to birth our baby. No matter where we birthed, no matter who was present, no matter our circumstances in pregnancy or before, no matter our beliefs around birth, no matter what happened to us or around us at that time. We birthed better when we used skills.